Good morning, Humber Valley. My name is Trevor Brisbin, and thank you so much for sharing a bit of your day with us. We've been in this series that we're calling Hindsight is 2020, where we've looked at some of the dynamics and difficulties coming out of an exceptionally challenging year. And of course, we know that the challenge seems to be far from over. But ultimately, the idea for this series kind of comes from that. You know when you walk out of a meeting at work and it didn't go the way you wanted it to go, and you get back to the office and you call the team together and you're like, hey, can we talk about what happened back there? It just seems like it would be good to just hit pause and talk about some of the difficulty that is represented by the year 2020. So we've talked about isolation, and we've talked about boredom. Last week, we talked about masks. And this week, to wrap things up, as promised or threatened, we're going to be talking about toilet paper. Or to put it more accurately, we're going to use what toilet paper became in 2020 in order to talk about bigger ideas like human desire. Matthew chapter 6, which Karen already read for us, but let me circle back there. Jesus is talking, he says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths or vermin destroy." If we're going to read the Toronto version of this, it says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and raccoons destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and raccoons do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." I think the most basic reading of this passage is Jesus saying, don't go after these kind of treasures, being earthly treasures, but go after these kind of treasures, like heavenly ones. Treasures, like the valuable things, the things we desire. Treasures, the things we give value to, the things we determine matter in this world. And Jesus says that there's some things we should desire and there's some things we should treasure, and then there's some other things that, if it's up to God, if it's from God's perspective, they might just not be worth it. In 2020, toilet paper became a highly valued treasure. Think of how absurd that statement is. Like a year ago, February 2020, toilet paper has always been really good, right? Like you never want to run out of toilet paper, but you need it. You go to the grocery store, you pick a bit up every now and then, not a big deal. By mid-April, it was like trying to find the Loch Ness Monster because everybody was buying all of it. So what happened? Like what forces are at play between February and April to turn toilet paper into a treasure? Why do we value the things we value? What gives things value one day and a different value the next? Think of, even this week, right? Think of GameStop stock, right? Of course, I have no interest in trying to explain how markets work because I don't really know, but why did the desire and drive to hoard toilet paper all of a sudden become a thing? What are we to learn about ourselves? What are we to learn about the way we value and what fuels our desires? Why do we want what we want? This morning, let's learn from Jesus and from toilet paper. So Jesus tells us that some treasures are more valuable than others. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. In other words, some things that we place value on might not be as valuable as we perceive. Observation number 1. Sometimes value is inherent. Sometimes value is intrinsic, and then other times, a lot of the time, value is imparted or imposed. Sometimes value is inherent and intrinsic, sometimes it's imparted or imposed. Let's talk about inherent value quick. Inherent value is when something has value, not because of its relationship to anything else, but just because the essence of what it is matters. Life has inherent value. At any given time, in any given space, if there's life there, that life matters. Human life, animal life, vegetation, by the mere fact that it's alive, it has value. This is the essence behind that sort of prophetic slogan, Black Lives Matter. It's the proclamation that people of color have inherent equal value as human beings. Slave owners, historically, did not value black bodies beyond their exploitable economic benefit, but black bodies always had infinite value, even when not recognized by white supremacy. Black lives always matter, have always mattered, will always matter. You can say black lives have value, have always had value, will always have value. That's true. That's intrinsic or inherent value. Imposed or imparted value is different. Imposed value is contextual. It's dependent on the where and the when and the relationship. For example, if I were to give my son a really nice pair of Bauer skates for his 13th birthday, they're going to mean the world to him, right? I'll be a hero dad for getting them. When he's skating in Hyde Park with his buddies, the other 13-year-old boys will comment on how great his skates are, and he skates like Mitch Marner, and there's value in that. Now, if I were to give the exact same skates to a 13-year-old living in, say, Nakuru, Kenya, the value of those skates are drastically different, right? Skates don't have an inherent value. They only matter as an object to the extent we determine their worth, that they matter. A diamond is a great example of this. Think about a diamond for a second. What's a diamond? Just coal that has been under pressure for millions of years. A diamond is just a rock. So if I were to see you down at the shore of Lake Ontario one spring morning, and you're down there and you're skipping rocks on the quiet lake, I wouldn't even think about it. I would come over, we would probably have a conversation, I'd try and skip a couple rocks, and we'd have a chat, and then I'd go on with my day, you'd go on with your day. But if I were to see you down at the shore of Lake Ontario throwing diamonds into the lake, like, that conversation's gonna go different, right? It's like, stop, what are you doing? But why? Why would I react one way to one kind of rock and a totally different way to another kind of rock? Like, is our world genuinely any better off if a diamond is in a ring rather than in a lake? Nope. Somewhere along the line, someone decided that one was totally valuable and one was just throw it into the water, skip it. Like, what do they say now, right? If you want to get engaged to someone, you're supposed to spend half a year's salary to buy a diamond. If you make $50,000 a year, drop $25,000 on a rock, that's imposed value. Something matters only as much as we decide it matters. A grocery store cashier in Toronto makes $32,000 a year. Austin Matthews in Toronto makes $11.6 million a year. That's imposed value. There's inherent value and there's imposed value. Sometimes we get them confused. In the spring of 2020, the imposed value of toilet paper went from zero to treasure really fast. Why? What was behind the great toilet paper hoard of 2020? Observation number 2. Human desire, or the longing for what we want, is always borrowed. The reason why everyone was hoarding toilet paper is because someone was hoarding toilet paper. Let me explain what I mean by that. There's this famous French philosopher who you'll likely hear me talk about a lot as time goes on, but a guy by the name of René Girard. And he observed that human desire, what we want, isn't novel to any single individual, but is something that individuals borrow from each other. The things we desire are actually desires borrowed from another person. So you could say we want what we want because someone else wants it. Two kids playing in the basement for like an hour together. They've been down there, they've been getting along until Jill picks up a red toy fire truck to play with. Little Jack sees that little Jill picked up this fire truck and is now playing with it. And instantly, what toy does Jack want to play with? The fire truck, right? So Jack starts to cry and whine because he now wants the truck that Jill has. Now, what happens if Jill is a really nice friend and gives Jack the truck? She moves on from that. She picks up her American Doll toy or whatever it is, and she starts playing with that toy. And all of a sudden, what happens? Jack doesn't want the truck anymore. He wants, the doll. Of course, all this is happening at a subconscious level, but he wants what she wants. Or you could say he wants it because she wants it. He wants it because she wants it. Desire is always borrowed. Every teen romance film is based on this principle. There's this nerdy kid who wants the pretty popular girl to take notice of him, but he's invisible to her until another girl accidentally falls for him. And it's then and only then that the original pretty girl starts to take notice. Now, nothing's changed about the nerdy boy. He's still exactly the same. The only difference is somebody else took interest in him. Somebody else desired him, therefore their desires. This is the idea behind making someone else jealous. If you desire me, then they might desire me too. This is the idea behind celebrity endorsements. If Matthew McConaughey drives a Lincoln and wants a Lincoln, then you'll want a Lincoln too. The job of any good marketer is not to convince you that their product is the best, but to generate in you a desire. So I'm like a die-hard Leaf fan. Like, I love the Toronto Maple Leafs, which, if you were to look at that and think about that objectively, makes absolutely no sense. I was born 10 years after the Leafs won the last cup. It's been 4.5 decades of disappointment and frustration for me as a Leaf fan. Like, why would I still cheer for them? Why would I still be emotionally invested there? Until you meet my dad, who every Saturday night when I was growing up would stand in the kitchen with a glass of red wine, listening to the play-by-play on the radio, because to watch the game at his level of fandom was too stressful. Why do I cheer for the Leafs? Because I desire my dad, right? The desire is borrowed. I mimic, I borrow his desire and own it myself. Marisol and I are, you might not know this, but we're actually a mixed marriage. It's sometimes hard being a mixed marriage, but she cheers for the Montreal Canadiens. Yeah. So question, why would a woman who was born and raised in Oakville, Ontario, cheer for the Habs? Because her dad was born and raised in Montreal. We want what we want when we see what other people want. So when word gets out that toilet paper is starting to fly off the shelves, you and I begin to mimic or borrow the desire to have our own stockpile of cottonelle. Back to Jesus. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount and gives this teaching about what we should value and desire. And he says, value the heaven stuff more than you value the earth stuff. What a lot of really well-meaning Christians have done with this is to say, okay, this earth, this world, this life doesn't really matter that much. What really matters to God is when we get to heaven. The idea that this life is just sort of like a dress rehearsal for the more important life in heaven. We want our treasures to be in heaven. It's about like, do good works here so that you'll get rewarded there. Friends, that couldn't be further from what I think Jesus is getting at here. Remember that the very core, the very essence of Christianity is the reality that God is enfleshed, embodied. The theological term is incarnate in Christ. Christianity is the revelation that it has never been material versus spiritual or eternal versus temporal or now. But Christianity is a way to live in the world now in which the material is spiritual. The now, the present is eternal. It's what we talked about last week, if you watched. That when Christ is crucified and the curtain in the temple of Jerusalem is torn in two from the top to the bottom, it exposes the Holy of Holies, where Israel thought Yahweh in Yahweh's self lived and dwelt and inhabited. And as the curtain is torn, what the revelation is that the Holy of Holies is empty. There's nothing there. Because Jesus shows us it's our flesh. It's the wholeness of our lives. It's our humanity. It's this moment, which is the holiest of the holy. When Matthew uses the language of heaven here, don't hear like medieval constructs of harps and cherubs and clouds. That's not heaven as Matthew or Jesus envision it. 2 chapters back in Matthew chapter 4, Jesus says, repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. Now that word repent is Greek, meta, neo. Meta meaning change, neo mean mind, from which we get knowledge. Meta, change your mind, change your thinking. I like reimagine, re-envision the world is what Jesus is saying. For the kingdom of heaven has come near. For Jesus and for Matthew, heaven isn't a destination we achieve in the afterlife. It's a possibility, it's a reality right now in this life. The kingdom of heaven is here. It's the way of heaven is within reach. The way of God is right in front of you. It's a different way of being and living is possible right here, right now, in this moment in our flesh. It's like the earth has become this place where all of us are just running around chasing diamonds and toilet paper and jealous of each other for who has what toy. But with some imagination, there's another way to orient your life. There's a way to opt out of that game. There's a way to live for something that actually has inherent, intrinsic value. This is Jesus saying, friends, take a beat and think about whose desires are you mimicking? Whose desires are you borrowing? Is your life being spent chasing the proverbial toilet paper? Or are you investing in things that have real value? And this is where it gets really close to home. Stick with me on this one, okay? Jesus' teaching here on desire is embedded in what's called the Sermon on the Mount. It's this extended Jesus teaching. Near the start of that teaching, Jesus says this: "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Humber Valley, you are the light of the world. You are light in a world where desires are mimicked. You are light in a world that which matters the most, and they who matter the most, are often treated with contempt and complete disregard, while things like toilet paper and rocks are turned into treasure. You are light in a neighborhood where many would say treasure is abundant. Nice homes, nice cars, nice stuff. What if our being in this neighborhood is to enflesh, to incarnate a different desire, to be an alternative? What if our light is to live with desire not borrowed from stories of capitalism and accumulation, but from an imagination that sees holiness of heaven in others? What if we lived in such a way, organized in such a way, were community in such a way, that what oozed from our presence in this neighborhood was that Black lives matter, that trans lives matter, that Indigenous lives matter, that planetary well-being matters, that youth without shelter matters, that the lonely and the sick and the depressed and the traumatized matter. What if we're here in this neighborhood to shed light on a way of life that prioritizes the intrinsic, inherent value of every human being? What if we offered our neighbors something different to mimic, a desire that's worth borrowing? Radical care for the poor, uncomfortable inclusion of all, relentless advocacy for power redistribution, abandoned commitment to nonviolence, investment in economies that work for all people, not just the privileged. So friends, as we move deeper into who we are and who we are becoming, may we be the people who recklessly live the desire of the divine. May we be the alternative on display for the world, and may we always be keenly aware of which treasures are worth chasing and what might just be toilet paper.